Hi, it's JamesAnimalHarrison. It's time for a new lesson day. Today we're going to continue along the path we started last Tuesday, which was the path of tips for the young junior high, high school jazz band or stage band, whatever you want to call it, drummers. And we talked about some of the things you might encounter, and we'll continue this next week with some actual charts to show you some things. But today we're just going to make it short and sweet and talk about a little bit of how to play along with some of the section figures. If you remember from last week, a section figure is a figure written above the staff that the someone in the band, some section in the band will be playing. An ensemble figure is in the staff and it is more punctuated by breaking the time, where a section figure you keep the time going. So today we're going to talk about a little bit of a thing. If you want to call it comping, you can. It's really outlining the section figures. So if you have one note, you have one note. You play that note. It can be accented if it's that way, or if it's staccato, you can play it short on something like the snare drum versus something like a cymbal. If you have two notes that are playing, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, ba-da, then maybe what you want to play is understand that usually the second note is more important than the first. Unless it's punctuated differently, it usually is more important. So you want to emphasize that second note. Okay? So emphasizing by putting an accent on. The second note becomes more important. If you have 3 notes in a row, and I'm talking like quick notes, like maybe 16ths or 8 notes, usually they're smung, 3 8 notes in a row, then the third note becomes more important than the first 2. Okay, now you could just play the third note, ba-do-ba, 1, or if you want to play all of those, you can do that, but you accent the last one. And you could punctuate it on other parts of the kit. I'm just keeping it basic right now, even though I've got a big setup here. I'm just going to keep everything between the basic parts of the kit. When you have 4 notes in a row, like ba-ba-do-ba, ba-ba-do-ba, something like that, the first and the fourth note become the most important. If you want to call it the bookends, that's okay. So you want to emphasize in the first and the fourth note. Now you could just play the first and the fourth note. If they're going ba-ba-do-ba, ba-ba-do-ba, you're outlining that. Ba-ba-do-ba. Or you can play all of it. And if you do, you might have to slow it down and work on getting that faster, but another trick you can do is bring the right hand over. Especially if it's a fast hit. Or you can outline the bookends. Okay? We'll leave that up to you. If you have a series of notes that, let's see, ba-ba-da-ba-da, ba-ba-da-ba-da. If you want to play all of those, you're welcome to do that. But if that seems very busy, you can start to pick notes. You can play the first and the last. Ba-ba-da-ba-da. You can do ba-ba-da-ba-da. You can move the right hand over if you need to, but you know the idea is, and practice at all tempos. So that's what we're talking about today, is just learning to outline the section figures. You don't have to play every note. If you do, and there are a series of notes, the more notes there are, you can either play them all, which sometimes can start to sound a little bit square, especially if you're not articulating the long and short notes around the kit with long and short sounds. Try to match that tonality-wise. If it's necessary, you can do the first and last note, or you can do the peaks and valleys of that lick. You know, usually if you listen to the other areas of the band, usually especially the saxophones, they have a way of being able to articulate really well. And you'll always hear the director of the band singing doo-ba-doo-bop, doo-ba-doo-bop. Well, right away, that's telling me doo-ba-doo are long sounds. Bop is a shorter sound, and it's more emphasized. Doo-ba-doo-bop, do-dat, do-dat. You'll hear people doing that kind of stuff. Do-dat, 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 do-dat. You want to emphasize those last sounds more. Okay, so try to really listen to what the director's saying when they're singing those kind of things, and put that in your brain and realize, how can I interpret that on the drum set? And then just remember, if you've got two notes, the second note's most important. It's not always that way. It might be written differently, but most of the time, the second note is more important. If it's three, it's usually the third note. If it's four, it's usually the first and the fourth that have the most emphasis. You can play those two, or you can play all four, but accent the first and fourth. And then if you get a long rhythm, ba-ba-doo-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da, ba-ba-doo-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da, you can just play it ba-da-doo-ba-da-da-da, and just play that, or you can play it if you want to. Okay? So that's the tip for today. Listen to some Count Basie off of Basie Straight Ahead. The drummer's Harold Jones, one of my favorite jazz big band drummers, favorite drummers, period. But I think everybody who's in a school jazz band, you want to learn how to swing and punch a big band, that's the album you need to listen to. Count Basie with Harold Jones, and there's a tip for today for the young jazz band drummers. Give it a try.